Globalization and the interconnectivity of the world's nations in economic, cultural, and scientific pursuits is based upon a firm foundation of international law. Without these international laws regarding globalization, you might as well play brass sound effect number 2, because globalization will become nearly impossible.
Bruh.
In the modern era of air, sea, and land shipping all improved in their efficiency, as well as innovations such as the internet, the days of trading companies being the only link between continents and nations is now over. I'm looking at you, Dutch East India Company. With these improvements, however, comes a great balance. Even during wars and diplomatic disputes, national disagreements, or poor foreign relations, the ties of nations internationally must be maintained, which is where the international law, of course, comes in. This video will set out to teach you about the role of international law in globalization, as well as to describe the challenges and positive effects of these laws. Well, hope you learned something, and enjoy. There are a lot of laws, as you can see here. All these books down here just cover a fraction of United States law. Though in a place like China, or North Korea, or the Kingdom of Bamum, the laws will be completely different. Since through improved technology, trading and communication only takes a few minutes to a few days, rather than a few weeks to a few months, we're much more connected than ever before. Though a place like North Korea and a place like the Kingdom of Bamum inside Cameroon would traditionally never interact with each other, globalization has made this possible. But in two different societies, separated by continents and oceans, with different customs, goods, and developments, their laws would not work well together. Though these two countries are quite random, it still shows the differences in nations that are affected by international trade and relations. Since every internationally recognized nation is part of the United Nations, sorry Western Sahara, Abkhazia, South Ossetia, Artsakh, Somaliland, Pridnestrovin, Moldovan Republic, and Kosovo, the fully recognized nations of the world are able to work together to achieve things that are considered to be better for everyone. The use of international law is nothing new, however. For example, according to the United Nations International Law Commission, these sorts of international laws can be traced in their modern form back to the Congress of Vienna in 1814, which worked to cover the provisions of the fall of Napoleon's French Empire. But the part that's like today was not anything to do with the French, but instead about rivers and their use between nations. Since we can now plan agreements much more often than after the fall of empires, more treaties can be made, allowing for better relations between nations. Though, when agreements go well, the effects can be good towards the whole of countries overall. This isn't always the case. For example, the Geneva Convention of 1864, which protected soldiers around the world in times of war, was a much needed improvement in terms of international law regarding this such. It allowed for countries to no longer fear the deaths or maltreatment of their soldiers during wars. However, a problem with this treaty, as with other treaties, was that not every country was a signatory, and even some countries that were disregarded the emotions set out inside this treaty. That is a problem that still exists today, though it might not necessarily have to do with someone such as Italy or Japan during World War II. If the rules are too strict in an international law, countries may not sign it. And if the provisions are too lax, well, then the laws may not have very much effect. And from this, a balance must be maintained. Since globalization depends on laws in order to fully allow nations to work together towards collective goals of improvement, there needs to be some sort of basis for all these countries to follow. For example, the phone you're using, that's probably in your pocket or on your desk right now, was constructed, I guarantee in China, following international mining and materials laws, put together following international labor laws, shipped to the United States following shipping laws such as the General Agreement on Tariffs and Trade, and brought to you following, again, shipping laws, but also international monetary laws. Without these international laws, globalization most likely would not exist as we know it today. Certainly, if your phone did even exist, it would be in a much different form than it is now. Globalization is based on agreement and cooperation, so even during disputes, we must hold together internationally, following these agreements as they're signed for nations to remain as part of a globalization effort around the world. Thank you. That's all I have to say.